In a game like Hell Let Loose, there is a lot of different things that contribute to the content in the game and how the game is played. Whether it be the airstrikes you can call in as a commander, the tanks you can call in, the different infantry weapons, and just the way things act or work in game. However, if you really want to think about it, this game hasn't gone through a lot of major changes in how it should be played in at least a year, if not longer. And it makes the argument of, is this game getting stale? Is it going to actually retain its player base with the current state of the game and how it's stayed the same for so long? And that's the question you could ask yourself. Now, I think the game's very good in its own right. Is it perfect? Hell no. But I enjoy it. I play Clan Wars and everything like that. But I do understand the need to make new content that actually changes how the game could work, to add new dynamics, and to keep the game fresh. And overall, it's kind of what I'm going to talk about in this video, of at least 5 things that I think they should add to Hell Let Loose that would initiate some of these changes, either in a small way or a big way. Now, 2 disclaimers up front. I did take some inspiration from RazBora's RazCast, in which him and the FreshBakedGoods talked about some of the changes that they should do to Hell Let Loose. So I've tried to take a little bit of inspiration from that, but make it my own as best as I could. The second thing is, obviously, I'm not a game dev. I don't understand everything that goes into a game, so the feasibility or actual practicality might be less than what I thought or not as good as I thought. Also, this is not going to include just making the game more optimized and just bug fixes, stuff like that. That's not in this video. But yes, I know they should be fixing that too. But without any further delay, let's get into 5 things that I think would be cool to add to Hell Let Loose. Now, just another little thing here. I'll be using different games to use visual representations, but just throwing it out there. But starting with the first thing is something that a lot of people have been asking for. It's the Mortarman class, or just the addition of a mortar. To give you a very brief overview of this weapon, this is a handheld artillery piece or a piece of equipment that can be lugged around by a single infantryman and can be used to fire smaller explosives at enemy defenses or just enemy positions in general, using a higher firing arc to, say, shoot over things. And this would be a way that maybe people could actually get better direct fire on an objective and not have to rely on artillery, say if you have just no artillery players or crappy artillery players in general. I know a lot of people have been asking for this class, again, to change up the dynamic of squad stuff and just to add new content. But this is a big one I think a lot of people would have fun with, and it would change the artillery meta up a little bit, in my opinion. Most likely for the better. Now, this next idea does have some inspiration from the RazCast video I said at the very beginning, but I tried to make my own spin-off or solution to the problem. So in the podcast, they mentioned how tanks really haven't gotten a lot of actual gameplay changes and just have been kind of left to rot, essentially. And heavy tanks are the meta. And since they're so expensive, if you lose one, you're really behind the 8 ball, essentially. Again, very simplistic way to look at it. My solution was to maybe add tank destroyers. Now, this isn't a new concept that anyone else has brought up. This is something that I've at least seen once or twice before, but really hasn't been talked about enough, in my opinion. Bringing tank destroyers in the game to be a threat against other armor would, I think, be a big thing to add to the game, because at that point, your main goal is to simply kill tanks. You're not meant to assault objectives. You are to be a tank hunter. And the way you can make it work, again, I'm not a dev, so I'm more just throwing out some preliminary things. What you could do for the tank destroyer is it one-shots essentially all medium armor or lower, and if you get on the side of a heavy, then it one-shots. But if it hits the front, then it takes 2 shots, but it'll pierce right away unless you're at a weird angle. Now, obviously, what I presented here is very preliminary, so you could make the argument for, oh, it needs to be this much fuel, that much fuel, it needs to have this gun, so-and-so. But I think it can be done, and it would be a good way to change up the heavy tank meta. Now, each faction does have the ability to field different tank destroyers. So for the Americans, you can give them the M10 Wolverine or M10 Hellcat and put a metal plate on top so crew members don't get shot, so you don't have to change up the crew physics. For the British, you can give them the Achilles, which is a upgraded M10 Wolverine with a 17-pounder gun that was lend-leased to the British via the Americans. For the Germans, you can give them the Stug 3, like you see on screen now. And for the Russians, you can give them the Su-85, which essentially is just a T-34 chassis with a hull-locked 85mm cannon. But there's a lot you could do with this, and I think it just, again, it would add more vehicles to the game and would make it a lot better overall. Now, this one, I will admit, does directly come from the RazCast, as they brought up the idea of a naval bombardment during the Omaha or Utah beach maps, especially during offensive when you are the US and you are coming ashore via the Higgins boats and you're very vulnerable, especially when you only have one HQ. But I thought, why not go a step further and have just other new commander abilities that you can call in maybe only once in a given match. Such as maybe for the Americans you get a triple bombing run, or the Germans you get a V2 or V1 rocket strike. The British you get a tall boy bomb, or the Russians maybe you get an actual bombing run. There's a couple you could put here, but the way I would say with this is these are game-changing abilities. Now obviously bombing runs are too, but this would be one of those things of, if you're going to make a push, this is the time to use it. And make sure you have a crap ton of munitions to use it, because it's going to be very expensive, probably like 500-600 if not higher, but it'll help you get a push on. And it'd be one of those things of, because it can be seen as, oh, wouldn't that be broken if you just level an area with 3 bombing runs, or you have a V2 rocket strike, which the way I look at that is maybe it's basically a really good precision strike, then sure. But again, you would have to make the cost of munitions very, very high, or maybe it's a tank even. Maybe you give the Germans the King Tiger, or the Americans the Pershing, or something like that. This one has a lot of areas you can go off of, but it just adds a little bit more dynamic. Do you want to wait another 10 minutes to get a good push on and use that ability, or do you think a bombing run is enough? As a commander, you got to start making those decisions. And it's just a way you could add new dynamics to the game. Again, feasibility and or practicality is to be determined, but it just opens the door for other things, whether that be airstrikes, tanks, just other abilities in general. Going back to the vehicle well a little bit, how about adding the Panzer III or a Panzer III variant to the game as the German light tanks? Now, this main thing comes from the fact that the German light tank, the Panzer II looks currently in game, is just not the best light tank. It's arguably the worst of the main light tanks, such as the M3 and M5 Stuarts, the Tetrach, and the T-70. Not only does it not have a driver's whole machine gun, but it doesn't even have a gun that can take on armor. It has a 20mm cannon that can engage light tanks and recon tanks, but against any other tanks, the best you're going to do is suppress or mess up the gunners of the heavies and mediums and destroy some tracks. That's about it. Where the other tanks in question, like the Stuarts, the Tetraches, and so on, can at least get behind enemy tanks and actually destroy them. They can't just basically shoot their tracks and piss them off. They can actually do damage. And I think that's what they should do for the Germans. And I'm not saying you have to take the Panzer II out completely. Maybe make it a tank you can drop if someone is masochistic enough to want to play the light tanks, which I don't think would be very high. But you would see more people probably playing German light tanks if they were more useful in a overall sense instead of just a infantry killing role like the Panzer II looks is. And the Germans had plenty of Panzer III variants that you could either give it a 37 or a 50mm cannon. This one's a variant of the 50mm cannon on the Panzer III, as showed here in War Thunder. But it's just something I think that would change, again, the tank metas and also just, in general, add some new vehicles to the game. Because, yes, Panzer II looks great killing infantry, but it's pretty much useless outside of that. This last one I didn't intend to put on here, but I decided to go back on what I originally wanted to put in and go with this instead, since I have seen it before and it was something that was not mentioned in the podcast. And it is the ability to pop out of tank hatches to actually look around and have increased visibility for the driver, maybe even the gunner, debatably, and the commander, but at the cost of, you can get shot at when you're popping out of the hatches and get killed in the tank. Now, the way you can make this work would have to involve changing some of the tank layout features in the game. So what you see here is I'm in the spotter's position for my tank, and I'm in a scope type thing to scout enemies. And I've got a pretty good view of the battlefield just on top of what would actually be the tank commander's hatch. But if you get out of the screen, usually when you get in, zoom all the way out, you're in a periscope view inside the hatch, like you just saw there for a brief second. What you could do is make it to where you can turn the periscope wherever you want it, but at limited visibility. And you actually have to pop out of the tank if you want to see all around you in a quick manner. That way, if you want to address to your crew how you actually should move, you do that, and it would encourage tank commanders to be cautious with their tanks and actually scope out an area before advancing. And it would make it to where if you are outside the tank, you can maybe duck down and crouch down for a little bit to maybe limit the ability to get shot at, but then it limits your visibility in contrast. That way, you can see everything, it adds some new dynamics, but also it allows random infantry to potentially kill an enemy tank crew member, limiting its effectiveness and changing how a tank should be played, leading to maybe you getting destroyed in action. Maybe with this you can even go a step farther and have the tank crew member be able to shoot out with its pistol or a Thompson or whatever you're using in your loadout to actually like go at the enemies. Now obviously you wouldn't be able to like repair the tank. I think that part would be a little broken. You'd have to play around with it obviously, but it'd be cool to maybe be able to pop out of your hatch, look around, and maybe if you see someone with a satchel, you pull out your pistol or something and you shoot at them. Obviously it wouldn't be the most advantageous position to shoot at, but it'd be one of those things that maybe in a pinch it would help you. You're still exposing yourself, but you're potentially saving your tank from being satcheled or rocketed or anything like that. There's a lot you could go on with this, and it would obviously need some tweaking for it to work at its full potential, but it's something that I think would be really cool, and it also would make for some pretty badass shots in my opinion. Now, once again, just reminding, this is just my opinion, and I wanted to do something a little different here since people wanted to see some more one-off videos on the channel. So I encourage you guys to be in the comment section, put in what you think they should put in the game, and maybe did I miss the mark on some of mine? Would mine actually be feasible? Was there something that would be better? Leave it in the comments below. As long as you're respectful, I'll probably get back to you. But at the same time, though, I'm not super optimistic that they'll put a lot of these things in game or just any new things in the game right now until we learn what the new roadmap is. Going back to that same podcast video, the war correspondents group, or at least the main YouTubers as they're called, are just not that optimistic right now. And part of me, at least with how things have been going, I don't necessarily blame them. Although the latest edition of the console server browser has renewed my hopes a little bit since it has been a massive success in my opinion. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.